Welcome to the podcast. I am Jimmy, your host. Tonight we begin with something gentle. So if you're still scrolling, this is your sign to stop. Dim the lights, put the phone face down, let the room cool a little. I'm glad you're here. Tonight's story drifts along the edge of the sea, where time moves slower than it should, and nobody is really in a hurry to be anything impressive. There's magic here, yes, but the quiet kind, the sort that doesn't sparkle loudly or demand attention. The kind that simply exists, like autumn fog rolling in without asking permission. Our story begins with a lighthouse. Of course it does. But not the sort of lighthouse that shouts warnings at ships or flashes angrily through storms. This one is older, calmer, and frankly, a little tired of drama. It stood on a narrow cliff where the land tapered into rock and the sea stretched endlessly forward, like it was thinking about something and hadn't quite decided what yet. The lighthouse was built of pale stone, smoothed by centuries of wind and salt. Its paint had once been white. Now it was more of a thoughtful cream color, the kind things become when they've seen too much weather and stopped trying to look new. Locals called it the Wish Warden. Not officially, of course. Official records were boring and referred to it as Coastal Signal Tower 17B, because humanity insists on draining romance out of everything eventually. But fishermen knew better, children knew better, and the lighthouse knew best of all. Every night, just after sunset, when the sky turned that deep, bruised purple of late autumn, wishes drifted across the sea. Not big wishes, not dramatic ones, small ones. A sailor hoping his wife still waited. A child wishing tomorrow wouldn't hurt as much. A queen, somewhere far away, quietly wishing she could sleep without dreaming of everyone she'd disappointed. Wishes floated like soft embers, invisible to most eyes. They skimmed the waves, light as breath, and if they weren't caught, they vanished. That was the lighthouse's job, not to warn ships, but to protect dreams. Which brings us, inevitably, to the keeper. His name was Elias, and no one had ever accused him of being ambitious. He had inherited the position in the same way one inherits a crooked smile or a tendency to sigh before speaking. His father had been the keeper before him, and his father before that, because why break tradition when it's already working just well enough? Elias lived alone in the keeper's quarters, a small stone house pressed against the lighthouse like it needed emotional support. He woke early. He slept late. He spoke to the sea sometimes, mostly out of habit. And like all good lighthouse keepers, he had learned not to ask too many questions. Every night, he climbed the spiral stairs, lit the lantern, and adjusted the lens. The light it cast was soft, warm, and strangely comforting. More like candlelight than warning flare. When it spun, it didn't cut through darkness. It gathered it. Elias didn't know exactly how the lighthouse worked. That was intentional. The older keepers had believed understanding too much made the magic nervous. And nervous magic, of course, tends to wander off and find someone more interesting. So Elias followed the rules. Light the lamp, keep the windows clean. Don't interfere with the wishes, especially that last one. He had been warned as a boy, "You can watch them," his father had said, "but never touch, because wishes, once touched by human hands, had a habit of clinging." Autumn made the nights longer, the wind softer. Leaves from distant forests sometimes reached the shore, riding currents like tired travelers who had lost track of where they were meant to go. On one such night, Elias noticed something different. The wishes weren't drifting past the lighthouse. They were circling, slowly, patiently, like they were waiting. Elias leaned against the railing, lantern light warming his face, and frowned. This was new. And new things, in a place this old, were rarely polite. One wish hovered closer than the rest. It pulsed faintly. The color of moonlight filtered through the water. Not desperate, not loud, just lonely. Elias told himself he wouldn't touch it. Of course he did. His fingers brushed the air. The wish didn't vanish. Instead, it warmed, like it recognized him. And somewhere, deep inside the lighthouse, something ancient shifted in its sleep. The lantern flickered, not violently, just enough to notice. Elias swallowed. "Well," he said softly, because he had learned long ago that silence sometimes feels judgmental. "That's probably nothing." Of course it wasn't nothing. The sea sighed. The wind carried the scent of rain and rusted iron. And far away, across the water, someone else, someone who was not supposed to be here, opened their eyes inside a dream. The lighthouse continued to turn. The wishes continued to wait. And Elias Moran, keeper of forgotten hopes, stood very still, holding something he was never meant to hold. Not yet. The keeper who learned to listen. By the time autumn fully settled into the bones of the coast, Elias had stopped trying to understand the lighthouse in any practical sense. This was progress. The wind had changed its voice. It no longer screamed through the rocks like it wanted answers. It sighed. Long, tired breaths rolling in from the sea, carrying the smell of salt, wet leaves, and something faintly sweet, like old paper or apples left too long in a cellar. Elias noticed these things now. That was new too. He had always been a man who noticed schedules, not seasons, clocks, not clouds. He used to measure his days in tasks completed and lamps trimmed. But the lighthouse had begun to measure him instead. How slowly he walked the spiral stairs, how long he paused at the windows, how often he simply stood still and listened. Because the lighthouse had sounds now, not loud ones, nothing dramatic, just murmurs. They drifted through the stone at night, usually when Elias was half asleep in his narrow bed, wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly of oil and old wool. The sounds were not words exactly, more like names that had forgotten their shapes, soft syllables, gentle vowels, familiar without context. At first, Elias assumed this was what loneliness did to a man. After enough weeks without conversation, the mind invents company. Of course it does, because why wouldn't it double down? But then came the dreams. Not the usual kind. Not the scattered nonsense dreams of clocks melting or doors leading nowhere. These dreams were organized, polite even. In the first, Elias stood on the lantern balcony, looking out over a sea that was perfectly still. No waves, no moon, just darkness, smooth as glass. Then lights appeared beneath the surface, dozens of them. They drifted slowly, like glowing seeds carried by a current that did not exist. Each light pulsed once, gently, and Elias felt, without understanding why, that every single one carried a wish. Not big wishes, not heroic nonsense. Small ones, to be remembered, to rest, to forgive, to be forgiven. The dream ended without drama. No sudden waking, no panic. Just a quiet fading, like the lantern dimming at dawn. Elias woke with his hands folded neatly on his chest. That morning, he found the logbook open. He was certain he had closed it the night before. He was very particular about such things. But there it was, resting on the desk beneath the lantern lens, its thick pages exposed to the pale light of early autumn sun. A new entry had been written, not in his handwriting. The ink was dark, slightly uneven, as though the pen had hesitated. The wishes arrived safely. The keeper listened. Elias stared at the page for a long time. Then very calmly, he made tea. This was also progress. He began to test the lighthouse, though he wouldn't have used that word. Testing implied control. What he was doing was more like responding. At night, instead of busying himself with repairs or rereading old manuals, Elias sat near the lantern and listened. When the murmurs came, he did not try to decipher them. He simply let them pass through him, the way the tide passes through a harbor without asking permission. Sometimes the light changed, not brightness, direction. It would tilt, just slightly, as if following something far out at sea. Elias never saw ships when this happened. No sails, no smoke, nothing physical. But the beam lingered longer over certain stretches of water, warming the darkness there. Those were the nights Elias dreamed of faces. Not clearly, never clearly, just impressions. A woman brushing her hair by candlelight, a boy holding a cracked compass, an old man standing at a window that no longer existed. They never spoke. They didn't need to. By late autumn, Elias noticed something else. He was sleeping better, which felt unfair, honestly. His life had not improved in any material way. He was still alone, still cold most mornings, still eating the same bland meals because salt pork kept longer than hope. And yet, his chest felt lighter. The ache he had carried for years, quiet, familiar, like a dull knot beneath the ribs, had begun to loosen. He could not say when it started, only that it no longer hurt to breathe deeply. One evening, as the sun slid low and painted the sea in copper and rose, Elias found something on the rocks below the lighthouse. A small glass bottle. It had not washed in with the tide. He was certain of that. The tide had been wrong. The currents didn't move that way. Inside the bottle was a folded scrap of paper. The writing was cramped, careful. "I don't know if this will reach anyone, but if it does, please tell her I kept my promise." No name, no date. Elias held the bottle for a long time. Then he did something he had not done since childhood. He spoke aloud. "I hear you." said quietly to the sea. The lighthouse light shifted, just a little. That night, the murmurs were clearer, not louder, clearer, and Elias understood, finally, what the lighthouse was not. It was not guarding ships. It was not warning sailors. It was not even protecting the coast. It was standing watch over something far more fragile. The things people let go of, the wishes they release when holding them becomes too heavy. And Elias, sleepy, solitary Elias, had become its listener. Of course he had, because sometimes the quietest lives are the safest places for dreams to land. And somewhere beyond the horizon, the sea carried another wish toward the light. By the third week, Elias had stopped pretending the lighthouse was normal. This was progress, in a way. He still climbed the steps each evening with the same careful rhythm, hand brushing the cold stone wall, lantern swinging slightly at his side. But now, when the air shifted inside the tower, when it grew faintly warmer or faintly sad, he didn't flinch. He just sighed. Because of course the lighthouse had moods. Everything else in his life did. Why not the building too? Outside, autumn was settling into the coastline like an old guest who intended to stay. The wind smelled of wet leaves and salt. The sea darkened earlier each night, becoming a smooth, ink-colored thing that reflected almost nothing. The sky felt lower somehow, more intimate. Perfect conditions for dreams, apparently. Elias noticed the wishes first, as sounds, soft ones, barely there. They drifted in with the fog, like someone humming from another room. Not words at first, just tone, longing without language. The kind of feeling you get when you wake from a dream and can't remember what it was, only that it mattered. He heard them while polishing the great lens. He heard them while trimming the wick. He heard them while making tea that tasted faintly of metal and regret. The lighthouse didn't speak directly. That would have been too obvious, too rude. Instead, it let the wishes pass through it, the way wind passes through chimes. Elias was just nearby, and unfortunately conscious. One evening, as the light rotated slowly over the water, he heard a name, clear as a bell. Mara! He froze, rags still pressed against the glass. The sound didn't echo. It didn't linger. It simply existed for a moment and then drifted onward, slipping out toward the sea like it had somewhere important to be. Elias swallowed. He hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in years. Of course it was Mara. Of course the lighthouse would dig there. Why not double down on emotional damage while you're at it? Mara had been many things. A cartographer, a terrible singer, a person who believed the world could be understood if you just looked at it long enough. She used to sit on cliffs and sketch the coastline, hair whipping wildly, smiling like the wind had told her a joke. She had loved the sea. She had loved Elias. And then she had left. Not dramatically. No slammed doors. Just a letter, carefully folded, painfully kind. "I don't want my dreams to shrink," she had written. He hadn't known how to answer that. He still didn't. The lighthouse light completed another slow arc. Elias rested his forehead briefly against the glass, then straightened. He was not here to unpack his feelings. He was here to keep ships from crashing into rocks. Except apparently not that anymore, because no ships came close. Not anymore. The sea around the lighthouse was eerily empty. No lanterns bobbing in the distance. No sails. No desperate horns. Just water and darkness and the soft, drifting traffic of other people's unspoken hopes. The lighthouse wasn't guiding ships. It was guarding something else. Elias realized this gradually, the way you realize you've been sad for a long time, only after you stop being sad. The wishes didn't move randomly. They followed paths, gentle currents, invisible routes across the surface of the sea. Some drifted high, almost touching the light. Others skimmed low, barely above the waves. And the light, his light, did something to them. It steadied them. When the beam passed over a drifting wish, it slowed, smoothed, became clearer, more whole, as if the lighthouse was saying, "I see you. You may pass." Without the light, the wishes frayed, broke apart, dissolved into nothing. The lighthouse wasn't granting dreams, it was protecting them long enough to reach wherever they were meant to go. Elias laughed quietly at that realization. "Well," he murmured to the empty room, "that seems like a lot of responsibility for a building." The lighthouse, unhelpfully, offered no response. That night, something new happened. As the beam swept across the water, one wish didn't drift past. It stopped. It hovered just beyond the reach of the light, pulsing faintly, like it was unsure whether to approach. Elias leaned closer to the window. The wish felt heavier, older, not desperate exactly, just tired. And then, unmistakably, it moved toward him. The air inside the lantern room shifted, the hum deepened. The light flickered, not dangerously, but thoughtfully. And for the first time since Elias had arrived, the lighthouse did something undeniably strange. The glass warmed beneath his hand. The wish crossed into the beam. And suddenly, Elias wasn't standing in the lighthouse anymore. He stood on a shoreline that wasn't quite real. The sand glowed faintly, like moonlight had soaked into it. The sea was calm, unnaturally so, stretching out in perfect silver stillness. Above him, the sky was neither night nor day, just soft, endless twilight, romantic in the exhausting way dreams often are. Someone stood a short distance away. A woman. She wore a long coat, windless hair falling around her shoulders. She looked solid, more solid than the dream itself. She turned slowly, as if she'd been expecting him. Elias's breath caught. Not Mara. Younger, sharper around the edges, eyes bright with curiosity rather than memory. "Oh," she said, blinking. "So it does let people in." Elias stared, profoundly unprepared for this conversation. "Who," he managed, "are you?" She smiled apologetically. "Sorry, I'm Lena." She glanced around, then back at him. "You're the keeper, right?" Elias felt a strange weight in his chest. Not fear. Recognition. "No one's supposed to be here," he said. Lena shrugged. "Apparently, I'm very bad at following rules." even in my sleep. That's when it clicked. She wasn't a dream. She was dreaming. Somehow, impossibly, her wish had carried her here. "I think," Elias said slowly, "you're not supposed to be awake." "I think," Lena replied, "neither are you." Fair point. They stood there, two consciousnesses balanced on a glowing shoreline, surrounded by the soft murmur of passing wishes. Lena looked out at the sea, eyes wide but calm. "I've been trying to find this place for a long time," she said quietly. Elias felt the lighthouse's presence even here, a steady pulse behind the horizon. "This place protects dreams," he said. She nodded. "I know." "How?" She hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Because mine kept getting lost." Somewhere far away, the lighthouse light continued its slow rotation. And for the first time since Elias had taken the job, it felt like the lighthouse had been waiting. For him to notice, for someone else to arrive, or maybe for a story to finally begin moving forward. Very slowly, like everything else here. The lighthouse, of course, did not reveal all its secrets at once. That would have been too pedestrian. Our sleepy keeper, let's call him Elias, because of course he had to have a soft, romantic name, noticed a peculiar shimmer one autumn evening. The sky was the kind of deep indigo that makes you think the stars are only just pretending to hang there. The wind whispered through the cypress trees that lined the cliffs, carrying with it the scent of salt and the faint, ever so slightly sugary aroma of distant bakeries. Elias leaned against the weathered railing, a blanket around his shoulders, and noticed something that could only be described as dancing lights. Not the northern kind, nor fireflies, nor reflection from passing ships. No, these lights bobbed and floated just above the water, like tiny lanterns gliding along invisible threads. He squinted. Of course he did. Because what self-respecting keeper doesn't squint when the world suddenly starts behaving like it's a watercolor painting someone forgot to finish? That night, he dreamt vividly, as he often did in the lighthouse. But tonight was different. In his dream, the lights gathered into shapes, tiny boats, each carrying something delicate. Wishes, he realized, though it took him a moment, because he had a mind forever tangled between skepticism and awe. One boat carried a note, small and fluttering, written in golden ink. "May I finally be brave?" Another, much heavier, carried a small crystal that glimmered with muted sunlight. The most curious of all carried nothing at all. Instead, it hummed softly, a vibration that seemed to resonate in his chest rather than in his ears. The lighthouse itself hummed in response, and Elias understood in a whispering sort of way that it had always known these wishes were afloat, drifting like bubbles on a sea of memory. Some were old, centuries old perhaps, and some were mere minutes past, from sleepers he would never know. He also understood, in that calm, sleepy way that accompanies revelation, that the lighthouse's power was tied to him now, or rather, he was tied to it. Because why not, Of course. He yawned, and as he yawned, a soft knock echoed through the circular spiral staircase of the lighthouse. Strange, because he lived alone. A tiny, trembling figure appeared at the top of the steps. Not human exactly, but not entirely other either. Wings, perhaps? Maybe not wings. More like faint traces of moonlight forming delicate arcs behind the figure. The figure said, voice like water over pebbles. I've come for my wish. Elias, as you might expect, blinked, and then blinked again, because this is the kind of night where blinking is mandatory and possibly wise. Of course, he said, because again, polite agreement is essential when magical beings appear unannounced. The figure floated closer, revealing a small basket filled with letters and trinkets, all glowing softly. I don't know how to use it admitted. Elias nodded. Of course he nodded. Everyone always feels unsure around the lighthouse. Its power is not something you wield. It's something that finds you, whether you're ready or not. Together, they leaned over the railing, watching the wishes drift like jellyfish in the ocean, floating toward distant horizons. Some wishes shimmered, others fizzled and dissolved, returning to the sea with a sigh. And the lighthouse pulsed in rhythm with the wishes, almost as if it were alive, in a sleepy, dreamy sort of heartbeat. Elias realized that keeping the lighthouse was not just about solitude or guiding ships. It was about balance, between waking and dreaming, between longing and release, between a wish whispered into the night and the echo it leaves across the world. Some wishes were trivial, some profound, and some were oddly specific. One carried a single teacup, another a pair of shoes that seemed far too large for anyone. But the lighthouse did not discriminate, and so he settled back into his blanket, sipping lukewarm tea that tasted faintly of cinnamon and storm clouds. The figure beside him hummed a quiet tune, a lullaby older than the sea. The lighthouse glowed, and somewhere beyond the horizon a wish was granted, not in fireworks or fanfare, but in the gentle, quiet acknowledgement that someone, somewhere, had dared to hope. The autumn wind carried the soft scent of salt and magic, and Elias yawned again. He understood, finally, that the lighthouse's guardianship was eternal, gentle and infinitely patient, much like sleep itself. And somewhere far off, just beyond the veil of night, a single star blinked twice and then rested, as if nodding at the calm unfolding below. The following night, Elias awoke once more in the lighthouse, the autumn moon spilling silver across the spiral staircase like liquid light. The world outside had shifted slightly, as it always did. The waves lapped against the cliffs in a rhythm that felt almost conversational, and the lantern lights from the previous evening floated again on the horizon. This time, however, they were joined by something new, a faint chorus of whispers, not in words he could understand, but in the soft, musical cadence of hope itself. Elias wrapped himself in his blanket and descended the stairs, each step creaking in the familiar way, as if the lighthouse itself were stretching after a long slumber. At the bottom, he found the same delicate figure from last night waiting, perched on the edge of the lantern room with wings, or traces of wings, catching the moonlight. The basket was fuller tonight, brimming with letters, crystals, and trinkets that shimmered like captured starlight. "You have many wishes tonight," Elias said, voice calm and gentle. He didn't ask why or how. They never needed answers in the lighthouse. The figure tilted its head, a soft glow pulsing in rhythm with the wishes floating over the sea. "They come easier now. Perhaps the lighthouse trusts me." Elias smiled faintly, because, of course, the lighthouse trusted only those who were willing to keep vigil over dreams with infinite patience. It trusts anyone willing to see without rushing, to listen without interruption. He gestured toward the glowing objects drifting toward the horizon. "Do you see how each one moves at its own pace? Some are heavy, some light, and some almost invisible until you pay attention." Tonight, Elias noticed a particular wish struggling against the current of the sea. A small, ragged envelope, almost translucent, with the words, "I wish to remember," etched in silver ink. The figure reached out, trembling slightly, and gently lifted the envelope from the water. As it did, the lighthouse pulsed warmly, a soft vibration that hummed through the floorboards and into Elias's chest. "You feel that?" he asked softly. "The lighthouse knows this one is fragile. Handle it with care." The figure nodded, and together they followed the envelope's gentle, erratic movements as it floated toward the horizon. Elias realized, once again, that the lighthouse's magic was not about control. It was about guidance. Some wishes demanded patience, others attention. All of them required respect. And then, unexpectedly, the sea itself seemed to shimmer, revealing a path of silver light stretching from the horizon straight to the lighthouse. The wishes glided along it like boats on invisible rails. Elias blinked. Of course he blinked, because the lighthouse had never shown him this before. Perhaps it was teaching, or perhaps it was simply curious to see what he would do. The figure approached Elias, its voice like soft wind over water. "Will you follow me tonight?" "Where?" he asked, though a part of him already knew. In the world of the lighthouse, questions were sometimes polite formalities, not necessities. "To the place where wishes are born," the figure said, eyes shimmering like the distant moon reflected in rippling water. "There, you'll see how the lighthouse chooses which wishes it carries and which it releases." Elias nodded, feeling a sense of calm he had never known outside these walls. They stepped together onto the glowing path, each footfall leaving a faint ripple of silver light behind. The lighthouse hummed in approval, or perhaps anticipation, and the sea sang quietly, its song a melody woven from countless whispered hopes. As they moved, Elias glimpsed the stories behind the wishes. A single mother hoping for courage, a soldier dreaming of peace, a child longing for a lost pet, and countless others whose lives brushed against the edges of the lighthouse's magic. He understood, in that quiet, sleepy way unique to dreamlike nights, that each wish carried more than desire. It carried memory, love, and the fragile heartbeat of hope. And somewhere above, in the velvet sky, a comet passed silently, as if offering a nod of encouragement to the keeper and his ethereal companion. The lighthouse glowed brighter, not with urgency, but with the serene power of endless patience. Elias yawned, his blanket trailing behind him, and realized that the lighthouse's lessons were slow, deliberate, and infinitely gentle. Magic, he thought. Romance, he thought, and the autumn nights that cradled both. These were not things to grasp, but to inhabit, to breathe in with quiet acceptance. And with that, he stepped forward, deeper into the luminous river of wishes, ready to learn what the lighthouse had guarded for centuries. The path of silver light stretched before Elias and the ethereal figure, undulating gently like the surface of a calm sea at dawn. The farther they travelled, the more the wishes revealed themselves, not as letters or trinkets now, but as flickering, intangible shapes that glimmered like fireflies trapped in glass jars. Each one pulsed softly, breathing, moving, and occasionally sighing in relief when they found the lighthouse's guidance. Elias felt a strange sense of vertigo, not the dizzy kind, but a gentle, dreamlike vertigo that made him aware of the quiet majesty of this place. "Are we flying?" he asked softly, even though his feet still seemed to touch the silvery path. The figure smiled, a motion so subtle that the moonlight barely caught it. Not flying, exactly. More like stepping through the memory of every hope ever whispered into the sea. Elias followed along, noticing how some shapes flickered faintly, like shy stars, while others glowed boldly, demanding attention. A tiny cluster of wishes hovered near the surface, each one carrying a scent of autumn leaves and warm bread, so ordinary yet impossibly comforting. "Why do some float so freely while others struggle?" Elias asked. The figure tilted its head, wings, or vestiges of wings, fluttering softly. "Some wishes are ready. They know where they are going. Others need patience, guidance, someone to notice them." Ahead, the path widened into a vast basin where the sea itself seemed suspended in time. Here, the wishes formed a river of light that snaked around invisible islands. Elias stepped carefully, aware that every ripple of the silver water beneath him resonated through his chest. And then he noticed something that made him pause, a wish unlike the others, dark at its edges, pulsing faintly with a hesitant glow. It was alone, almost invisible, struggling to speak its desire into the current. Elias reached out instinctively, and the figure beside him whispered, "Some wishes are shy or scared. Some carry the weight of forgotten dreams." He lifted the faint light, and the lighthouse responded immediately, pulsing warmly, as if acknowledging his touch. The air around them shimmered, and Elias realized that this wish was older, carrying memories from decades, or perhaps centuries, back. "Why is it so heavy?" he asked softly. "Because it is not just a wish," the figure replied. "It is a promise someone made long ago and forgot, a hope left behind when the world demanded something else. The lighthouse carries them all, even the forgotten. Elias held the fragile light, feeling its subtle heartbeat. And as he did, he understood the quiet, unspoken magic of the lighthouse. It didn't create dreams, it honored them. Every whispered hope, every longing, every quiet wish, all were preserved, guided, and sometimes delivered, depending on the readiness of the dreamer and the care of the keeper. Around them, the river of wishes moved in a delicate symphony. Some glimmered and floated toward the horizon. Others lingered, waiting, while a few seemed to bow in deference to Elias and his companion. He realized the lighthouse was alive, not in the sense of a heart beating or lungs expanding, but alive in the patience it extended, the care it embodied, and the gentle rhythm of protection it offered to all dreams. "Do you ever wonder?" Elias asked. "What happens if a wish isn't ready?" "Then it waits," the figure said simply, "and the lighthouse watches. Magic is patient, love is patient, autumn teaches patience, and you are learning it too." Elias smiled faintly, feeling the warmth of the lighthouse settle around him like a soft blanket. He understood now that being a keeper is not about action or heroics. It was about presence, attention, and devotion to the quiet unfolding of hope. As the river carried them onward, Elias noticed the first glimmer of dawn brushing the horizon, soft and pink, reminding him that even in a world of magic, time continued to pass. But here, in this luminous river of wishes, the night lingered just a little longer, allowing dreams to breathe, to shine, and to be held. And so Elias continued, step by step, into the living magic of the lighthouse, the figure beside him guiding him gently, and the river of wishes whispering all the stories that had ever dared to hope, shimmer, or dream. Elias had begun to feel the rhythm of the lighthouse, as though it were a heartbeat shared between him and the river of wishes. Each step brought him closer to the horizon, but also deeper into understanding the quiet language of hope. And yet, just as he was beginning to feel the serenity of this place as natural, as ordinary, a sudden ripple in the silver river made him pause. From the mist, a figure emerged, a presence that seemed both familiar and impossible. It was a visitor, but unlike the soft, guiding figure who had been his companion since he arrived. This one shimmered with a subtle golden glow, but not entirely solid, like a dream not yet fully formed. The river bent around them, parting slightly as if recognizing the importance of this newcomer. Who are you?" Elias asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I am a dream walker," the figure replied, voice musical, ethereal, carrying the faint scent of autumn apples and candle wax. "I have come because one of the wishes has called me, or perhaps because it has called you." Elias frowned, holding the faintly pulsating wish he had rescued. "Called me? How can a wish call someone?" The dreamwalker's eyes sparkled. Wishes are alive in ways most never notice. They remember the hands that nurtured them, the hearts that believed in them, and sometimes they call across time and space for the care they need. Elias felt a shiver of understanding. This was more than a lighthouse, more than a river of dreams. It was a bridge, a conduit for intentions and desires, alive with memory and magic. And now he realized there were rules he hadn't yet grasped. The dreamwalker stepped closer, and Elias noticed that their presence caused the river of wishes to bend toward them almost reverently. "You are the keeper," the figure said gently, "but the lighthouse is not yours alone. Some wishes demand more than one witness." The thought was dizzying. More than one witness? Yes. Some dreams cannot unfold without acknowledgement, without understanding. Some cannot move forward until someone sees them truly. The figure gestured to the faintly glowing wish in Elias's hands. "That wish you hold. It is tethered to more than just your heart. There is another dreamer, far away, who must see it too before it can find its way." Elias felt the weight of the revelation settle over him. He had thought his task was simple: guide the wishes, protect the river. But now he understood that some dreams were intricate, interwoven with countless lives and unseen threads. And he, in his small role, had become part of that vast, delicate tapestry. The dreamwalker extended a hand, a gesture both inviting and solemn. "Walk with me. There is someone waiting in the dream beyond the lighthouse. Someone who has been trying to reach this wish for years. Together, we can guide it." Elias hesitated only for a moment before placing the faint light in his palm. The lighthouse responded immediately, a warm pulse radiating through the air, and the river of wishes rippled in acknowledgement. They began to move, walking along the silver path, and Elias noticed how the mist thickened, turning into a soft spiral of moonlight that lifted them gently, carrying them toward the edge of the horizon. "Why me?" Elias asked softly. "Why am I the one who sees this?" The dreamwalker smiled, enigmatic, with the patience of someone who had witnessed centuries of hope. "Because you believed when others doubted. Because you listened when others turned away. Because magic, love, and autumn patience, sometimes they converge in the most unexpected hands." As they walked, Elias noticed the wishes around them reacting subtly, brightening or dimming depending on their significance. The shy, hesitant ones stayed close, whispering in their own gentle way. The confident, bold wishes surged forward, eager for their moment. And in the midst of all, the single tethered wish pulsed more steadily, as if drawing courage from the presence of two keepers instead of one. Finally, they arrived at a place where the river of light widened into a vast basin, shimmering like a sea of stars reflected in glass. There, a faint figure appeared, half hidden, hesitating, trembling with anticipation. Elias recognized immediately that this was the other dreamer, the one connected to the wish he held. The dreamwalker looked at Elias, and their voice softened further. "Your task now is simple, though it feels immense. Bring the wish to them, let it speak, and in doing so, you will learn the true power of the lighthouse." Elias stepped forward, heart beating quietly but with purpose. The tethered wish floated from his palm, moving gracefully toward the other dreamer. And as it did, the river of wishes shimmered brighter than he had ever seen, as if the entire sea of hopes was acknowledging a small, profound miracle. The other dreamer extended a hand, trembling, and the wish nestled into it like a bird finding its branch. And in that instant, Elias felt a connection, a quiet, magical bond between hearts, dreams, and the timeless care of the lighthouse itself. The dreamwalker whispered, almost to themselves, "Every wish deserves to be seen. Every hope deserves its moment, and every keeper must learn to share the weight of magic." Elias nodded slowly, feeling the truth of it in his bones. The lighthouse was more than a guardian of dreams. It was a teacher, a connector, a silent witness to the enduring power of hope. And as the basin of light shimmered around them, Elias understood that this night, this river, and this moment were exactly what the lighthouse had meant for him all along. The night around the lighthouse grew softer, as though the world itself had taken a long, careful breath. Elias stood beside the dreamwalker, watching the other dreamer cradle the wish, its glow now steady and warm, like a lantern in autumn fog. There was a quiet satisfaction in the air, but Elias could sense that the river of wishes still had secrets to share. "Not all wishes are ready," the dreamwalker said, almost as if reading his thoughts. "Some linger too long, tangled in fear, doubt, or longing. They wait for someone to notice them, to give them permission to exist fully." Elias tilted his head, considering the notion. "So, some wishes never reach anyone?" The dreamwalker shook their head gently. "They do reach someone, eventually. Sometimes it takes years, sometimes lifetimes. The lighthouse does not rush them. It only watches, protects, and guides when the time is right. Patience is part of the magic." Elias let the words sink in. He had always thought magic demanded action, quick decisions, bold choices. But here, it was about restraint, observation, and quiet care. The lighthouse was not a force of control. It was a keeper of timing. The river of wishes pulsed softly around them, and Elias noticed how some flickered faintly, as though shivering, in the cold, invisible currents of hesitation. The dreamwalker gestured toward them. "Those are the hesitant ones. They need a gentle push, a witness, a heart willing to believe just a little longer." Elias knelt beside one of the flickering wishes. It trembled like a tiny flame struggling against the wind. He whispered softly, almost as if he was speaking to a child. "You are seen. You are important. Your time will come." The wish responded with a faint shimmer, a ripple of acknowledgement traveling through the river. The dreamwalker smiled. "You see, even the smallest recognition matters. The lighthouse amplifies it, holds it steady, and, eventually, the wish finds its way." Elias felt a strange warmth in his chest, a gentle echo of satisfaction, as if the act of witnessing and believing had become a small magic in itself. "And what about wishes that are too heavy?" he asked. "Too painful, too lost. Can the lighthouse handle those? The dreamwalker paused, eyes reflecting the pale moonlight over the silver river. Even heavy wishes have a place here. They linger longer, but the lighthouse does not discard them. It teaches the keeper patience, endurance, and empathy. Sometimes the heaviest wishes become the most profound lessons. Elias absorbed the thought, letting it settle around him like soft, golden leaves drifting through autumn air. He realized that the tethered wish he had delivered earlier was only the beginning. There were countless others, some bright, some dim, some fluttering, some still and quiet, each waiting for someone willing to listen, to care, to believe. The dreamwalker extended a hand toward the horizon where the river curved gently into the mist. "Come, there is something I want to show you." The lighthouse does more than protect wishes. It shapes the flow of dreams, weaving them together, creating patterns that humans cannot yet see, but feel as hope, comfort, and inspiration. Elias followed, stepping carefully along the riverbank of light. As they walked, the wishes around them responded, pulsing rhythmically as if the very air hummed with magic. Shapes began to emerge in the mist, delicate arcs, spirals, and intertwining streams that formed a kind of map, or perhaps a tapestry, of unseen connections between hearts and dreams. "Every wish touches another," the dreamwalker explained, "even ones from faraway places, even ones that seem lost or forgotten. They intersect, overlap, and influence each other. This is the true magic of the lighthouse. It does not merely guard wishes, it harmonizes them." Elias watched in awe as the river transformed before his eyes, shifting and bending, folding like silver silk. Each flicker of light represented a wish, a hope, a heartbeat. The whole scene was quiet, serene, yet profoundly alive. "And one day," the dreamwalker continued softly, "the wishes themselves will guide the dreamers. They will teach, comfort, and illuminate paths that no one could predict. Your role as a keeper is to witness, nurture, and sometimes intervene. But above all, you must believe." Elias felt a deep calm settle over him, a sense of connection to something far larger than himself. He understood now that the lighthouse, the river, and all the wishes were not merely magical constructs. They were reflections of human hope, patience, and the quiet persistence of dreams. And as the moon rose higher, bathing the river in silver light, Elias knew that he had become more than a keeper. He was a participant in the dance of dreams, a gentle guide along the river that sang names, and a witness to the enduring, mysterious, and beautiful magic of hope itself. The morning light never truly reached the lighthouse in the way one might expect. Instead, a soft, golden haze lingered in the air, as if the dream river itself had borrowed the colors of dawn and kept them for eternity. Elias wandered the banks, tracing the paths of flickering wishes as they meandered lazily around the lighthouse, their gentle pulses echoing like tiny heartbeats. "Not all who enter the river are ready," the dreamwalker said, stepping beside him. "Some arrive with their hearts tangled in sorrow, or with fear too heavy to untangle. That's why the lighthouse must be patient. Elias nodded, feeling the weight of the responsibility settle in his chest. There was a certain humility in standing amid countless hopes and dreams, each delicate yet unyielding. He realized that the act of guarding was also an act of learning, to recognize the quiet strength in what seemed fragile and the persistence in what seemed fleeting. Suddenly, a ripple of motion stirred in the distance. A new shape entered the river, a wish that glimmered brighter and larger than any Elias had seen before. It wasn't tethered to a single human heart. Instead, it pulsed like a collective longing, a wish born of many intertwined hopes. The dreamwalker's eyes softened. Ah, this one is special. It comes from a place where countless hearts whisper together, a wish that carries the weight of shared longing. It will need guidance more than most. Elias approached the shimmering form cautiously. As he drew near, he could sense the complexity, fragments of memories, fleeting desires, laughter and sadness, all wrapped into a single glowing entity. "How do we guide something like this?" he asked, voice low and careful. "You witness it," the dreamwalker replied simply. "You acknowledge it, you give it space, and you let it feel seen. Sometimes the gentlest touch is all that's needed to help a wish unfold." Elias raised his hand, brushing the soft glow. For a moment, the wish shivered, then pulsed with a deep, steady light. He felt a rush of warmth, a feeling akin to being embraced by countless invisible hands, each one lifting a fragment of sorrow, each one carrying hope. The river seemed to respond, flowing faster, spiraling more intricately around the lighthouse, as if recognizing the presence of something extraordinary. "Do you feel that?" the dreamwalker murmured. "The river is alive, and it knows. Each wish is a story, and some stories have the power to reshape the current itself." Elias's gaze traveled upward toward the lighthouse beacon. It rotated slowly, spilling soft beams over the water. The light caught on the shimmering edges of the giant wish, illuminating hidden patterns, delicate traces of intertwined dreams. "It's beautiful," he whispered, "like watching an entire life bloom in a single heartbeat." The dreamwalker nodded. "It is beautiful. But remember, beauty and chaos often travel together. Guiding such a wish requires attention, patience, and humility. One misstep, and the threads may tangle in ways that take nights or lifetimes to untangle." Elias exhaled, feeling both exhilarated and humbled. He realized that his role as a keeper had grown in ways he could never have imagined. No longer was he merely a solitary guardian. He was part of a network of dreams, each connected to countless others, each waiting for guidance and care. A gentle wind swept across the river, carrying whispers of distant dreamers. Some murmured softly, others laughed, and a few wept. Elias recognized their voices now, not individually, but as part of the great symphony of hopes that the lighthouse preserved. The river's song intensified, a melodious, undulating harmony that seemed to resonate with his very heartbeat. "And soon," the dreamwalker said, voice hushed, "others will come. Dreamers who have heard of the lighthouse, or who will stumble upon it by accident. Some will bring wishes, some will seek answers, and some will simply rest. Each will leave their mark. Elias felt the truth of it deep in his bones. The lighthouse was more than a keeper of wishes. It was a nexus, a living repository of human yearning, a quiet monument to hope and persistence. He understood now that each visit, each interaction, rippled outward, touching lives in ways unseen but deeply felt. For the first time, Elias truly embraced the scope of his role, not as a solitary guardian, but as a part of a grand, unfolding story, one that stretched across time, space, and the hearts of countless dreamers. As the giant wish floated higher, spinning gently in the current, Elias knew that the river had sung many names before him, and it would sing many more long after. The lighthouse shone steadily, a beacon of quiet magic and enduring patience, as the river whispered its timeless melody. And somewhere within its currents, the first hints of a new story began to shimmer, waiting for the right dreamer to notice, the right heart to listen, and the right soul to guide it toward the light. The evening air settled softly over the lighthouse, a gentle hush rolling across the river like a lullaby. Elias stood at the edge of the quay, feeling the cool, autumn-tinged breeze brush against his face. The river shimmered with the accumulated dreams of countless hearts, each glowing faintly, like stars reflected on dark water. He could hear their whispers now, mingling into a soft, harmonious murmur, almost like the sigh of the world itself. The dreamwalker appeared beside him, quieter than ever, as though even his presence feared to disturb the delicate balance. "Do you feel it?" he asked, voice low and serene. "The calm that comes after everything finds its place. The river is at peace tonight." Elias nodded, letting the tranquility wash over him. He watched as the earlier giant wish, full of interwoven hopes, slowly descended, gently folding into the river's current, its radiant glow diffusing into 1,000 smaller, sparkling wishes. "It's like they're all breathing together," he murmured, "like the river itself is alive." "Of course it is," the dreamwalker replied, a faint smile curving his lips. "And you've learned the most important part. To guide is not to control. To guard is not to own. You simply witness, nurture, and allow the river to flow as it must." Elias stepped closer to the lighthouse, its tall silhouette cutting against the deepening indigo sky. He could feel the magic radiating from it, not flashy or overwhelming, but subtle, persistent, and deeply warm. Every beam of light that swept across the water carried a quiet promise of protection, of dreams realized, and of hope unbroken. A gentle laughter floated from the river, playful and light, as a cluster of tiny, fleeting wishes darted like fireflies, spinning and weaving through the beams. One touched Elias lightly, a whisper of gratitude, and he felt a warmth blossom in his chest. "I never knew dreams could feel like this," he said softly. "They do," said the dreamwalker, "for those who listen carefully and those who are willing to remain patient. Each heart has its story, each wish its place. And now, Because of you, this lighthouse stands as a haven for them all. Elias gazed at the horizon where the river met the night, the stars above reflected in the gentle ripples. Somewhere, far beyond the lighthouse, he imagined dreamers lying in their beds, drifting into sleep, unaware that their wishes traveled safely here, cradled by the light and magic of the river. The dreamwalker's voice broke the silence, soft and contemplative. Tonight, the river sang its last song for now. But remember, Elias, tomorrow it will begin again. New dreams will rise, new stories will unfold, and you will be here to see them, guiding, guarding, and witnessing. Elias smiled, feeling the weight of responsibility melt into contentment. He turned to the lighthouse, tracing its familiar lines against the starlit sky. Its beams rotated steadily, illuminating the water, each sweep touching wishes both new and old. A sense of peace filled him, deeper than he had ever known. As the river murmured beneath him, Elias realized that this place, the lighthouse, the river, the gentle magic, was not merely a sanctuary. It was a testament to patience, to hope, and to the quiet, enduring beauty of dreams. And in that realization, he felt his own spirit become part of the river's song, a subtle note woven into the eternal melody of wishes. Finally, he stepped back, letting the night wrap around him like a soft blanket. The lighthouse shone steadily, the river shimmered with countless stories, and somewhere, deep within, Elias understood that he had found his place, not just as a keeper of dreams, but as a witness to the enduring magic of the world. And so, the lighthouse stood tall, guarding the wishes that danced across the river, beneath a sky full of stars, waiting patiently for the next dreamer, the next story, and the next night to fall. The river sang its lullaby, the lighthouse glimmered with soft light, and the world, for a moment, was perfectly at rest. From all of us here at Doze Tales, may your dreams be soft, your rest deep, and your mornings full of quiet light. Until next time, sleep well, dream kindly, and let the gentle stories carry you softly through the night.